We ready? Owen?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good. Good evening. It's 7:02 p.m. It's September the 3rd. This is the meeting of the Financial Planning Committee. This open meeting of the Financial Planning Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on March 29th, 2023. All members of the Financial Planning Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The act allows the Financial Planning Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of the meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Let's start with a roll call. Bob Babcock. Not here, I think. Ken Picard. Ken Picard. Roll call. He's there somewhere. Ken? We'll come back to him. John Ray.
Present.
Susan Satori.
Present.
Scott Stocklin.
Present.
And let the meeting minutes note that Chief Dave Parenti is with us, Mitch Cohen from the Select Board and co-chair of the Fire Station Building Committee, Jason Little, the Town Finance Director. Ken Picard. He had some technical difficulties. Ken. He's gone. Hopefully he comes back in. All right. We have two agenda items. Discuss revisions to the financial planning report regarding the fire station project and the approval of several meeting minutes. Here's Ken. Roll call. Ken Picard.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm having issues with my computer, but I'm here.
Okay, let the minutes reflect that Ken Picard is present. We have a quorum. I'd like to make a motion that we address the meeting minutes first and then the report second.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we do a block approval of meeting minutes, April 1st, 2024, May 23rd, 2024, August 15th, 2024, as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just like to make a comment that I like how concise they are. I think they're very well done. Thank you to Angie.
And that's Angie. Yep, I agree. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? All those in favor?
Ken Picard, aye.
Susan Satori?
Aye.
John Ray?
I abstain. They were going back months and months and months, and I haven't had a chance to get them, and I got them late, so it's not a reasonable time for me to have a view.
Okay, Scott Stocklin?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Okay. The next item on our agenda, I'm going to share the screen, is the report I sent to you the other day. The salient changes here are on pages 11 through 14, and they reflect the new budget numbers that were discussed and reviewed with the Fire Station Building Committee last week and voted on by the Fire Station Building Committee. Changes suggested by this committee are reflected in this version. And I don't know if we need to go page by page.
Now what happened?
I just have general questions. I don't think I need to go page by page. I don't know about everybody else.
Okay, anything on page 1? Page 2 reflects this meeting, September the 3rd. Oops. The background general comments were not changed from our last review. Page 3 included more detail about the project and some of the background that goes into page 4. Some of that was from your feedback the last time we discussed this.
John, do you have what has changed? Do you have a red line? I just don't.
I cannot provide a red line at this point in time.
Can you point us to the changes so I know what I'm looking at?
Fine, everything on page 3 and 4, for the most part, was enhanced, and it was enhanced from information that the Fire Station Building Committee minutes reflected, and information on slides that they have used in the past, and for example, that currently appear on the YouTubes on the website. So the 2017 is when the town and the department evaluated the current building and staffing. 2018, an RFI was put out to find suitable parcels of land in the downtown area of at least 2.5 acres. And a feasibility report in November 2018 indicated the cost of this renovating Pierce Street would be $18.5 million, not including acquisition of adjacent properties. That was placed on hold during the COVID pandemic. On page 4, after a lengthy review, the renovation option was not chosen based on these dot points here: location challenges, safety concerns with the roadway alignment at Main, Church, and Pierce Street, cost to purchase the adjacent properties, which were not open for sale at the time, the cost and scope of the renovations required to make the building compliant with the required building codes and energy standards, proximity to Cold Harbor wetlands impeding the expansion of the building, and logistical challenges and operational disruptions impacting the firefighters and ambulance services during the renovations and construction. So subsequently, it was decided the building a new station was the most feasible option. So that's the main new stuff that is there, John.
Thank you.
And then it goes from there into the activities that the Fire Station Building Committee had undertaken since March of last year. So this table reflects the numbers of meetings that were held with various committees and boards by the Fire Station Committee in concert with HKT Architects and Collier's project leaders, the owner's project manager. So there were considerable meetings held across various committees. HKT was selected, and among other things, completed the design phase, including program development, schematic costs, design development reconciliation of costs with 2 professional estimators, and construction documents. There were a number of Fire Station Building Committee meetings and public community information sessions that feedback was elicited on, including but not limited to the items on this table: building design, departmental operational requirements, driveway cuts, retaining walls, et cetera, et cetera. So this was enhanced from what we had before. On page 5,
I have a question on that chart.
please.
Are you saying that these are just comments that were made through public and in departments that came forward, or are they actually things that were implemented and cost money and put into the budget to do? Like, because did you actually do a traffic impact on Main Street, a study?
So as the committee discussed the project with HKT, these various components were part of the discussion. That's number one. There was feedback from the public in either public comment at the fire station meetings and the community sessions on these. But these are components of the design that HKT brought to the table. So the operational requirements for the fire department, where there is driveway cuts, the HVAC, the geothermal system, the parking lot configurations, all of this was part of the design process that they brought to the table.
Okay, thank you.
The second part of your question, Susan, was what?
Did the comments from public change any of the design elements and cost figures?
There was feedback on a number of these elements, the retaining wall, the configuration of that. There was feedback from the design review committee as well as the planning board, the zoning board of approval. So a number of these things were addressed or modified in the process to be compliant, and to make sure that the building as being specified was meeting the requirements of the department and the growth of the department and the town, and be compliant with local building codes, state building codes, etc. So those were brought to the forefront in those discussions. Most of these components that you see on here were on the horizon of what HKT brought to the table.
Okay, and then I just wanted to know, was there a traffic impact study actually done on it on Main Street?
Chief Parenti?
I had
Can
to
you
find
comment on that?
I had to find my audio button.
Thank you.
There was much discussion on traffic impact study. There was traffic count. There was two fairly significant traffic counts. One was for over a weekend, and the second one we did was actually for a full week of traffic counts. It was determined that there was no need for a traffic impact study because of the traffic impact studies are done when a business is coming in that causes a large increase in the traffic flow, and the fire station would not cause a large traffic increase in the traffic flow. So at that point in time, it was determined it wasn't needed. Also, there are money set aside if the state determines that we need to do a traffic impact study based on our curb cuts. And in that case, we'd move forward at that time.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Susan, I also think that as part of the reviews with the planning board, that came up. I know there were questions from probably design review and or the select board about that. And the chief just gave you the lowdown on where we are on that.
And now a quick question as we're talking about the process. The recommendation to go from 3 roof monitors to 2, where is that? And how is that feedback taken in and contemplated within what I'm looking at here?
Again, this is including but not limited to. The fire station building committee, in looking at cutting back expenses, looked at either eliminating them altogether. They ultimately voted to reduce the number from 3 to 2, reducing some of the costs.
Oh, so the rationale was to look at cost reduction measures?
In places, yes. And we'll get to why this thing is down to 41.3 million in a few minutes.
Thank you.
John, I had one more question before we leave here. So up above,
Please, Scott.
Yeah, you talked about the factors that were incorporated into making the decision to build a new station. One of those listed was the cost to renovate the existing station. And I think we talked about it last time. I'm not sure, like, do you recall what that was, or is there any way to find out or figure out what the cost was to renovate at that?
Yes, and here on page 3, There was a study, a feasibility study done as part of the prior committee to the fire station building committee was a feasibility committee. The chief was involved in that. Dawn Rand was, and a few others. The report in November 2018 indicated the cost to renovate it at that time would be $18.5 million, not including the acquisition of adjacent properties. Then that was placed on hold during the COVID pandemic. So it was $18.5 million then, without any details about the operational requirements of the department. Again, this was a feasibility phase, not a detailed design phase. The adjacent properties would be needed to expand it, and they were not available for sale. And again, as you see on the next page, there were other challenges with renovating Pierce Street. Cost to purchase adjacent properties was an unknown. Scope of renovations to make it compliant with building codes and energy standards, which have since now, in this year, been solidified. They were unknowns then. We knew they were coming, but the proximity to Cold Harbor wetlands was impeding the expansion of the building. So it was not an optimal site for renovation, and there was a lengthy review conducted. But the renovation option wasn't chosen, and subsequently it was decided that the new fire station was the most feasible. And the 6165 West Main and 10 Monroe properties were acquired finally in 2022 and collectively form the site of the proposed fire station.
So we're saying essentially, and I may not be exactly on point with the numbers, but basically what we're saying is back in 2018, the cost to renovate the existing station was roughly the same as building a brand new one.
In 2018, yes, I'll let the chief opine on that, please.
Yeah, the cost to renovate and the addition to Pierce Street was about $1 million more at that time than moving to 6165 West Main.
Okay.
There were several reasons for that. One of the big things was 10 Church Street would have been one of the properties we would have had to purchase. That building had historical significance, so we may have had to pay to move that building.
Okay.
And one of the other big things was we would have had to have temporary facilities for operations, which were at that time estimated to be about $800,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just
and Scott, to add to what the chief has, from what I reviewed there, both the renovate or the build options did not include the purchase price of the land. So the 18.5 didn't cover that, and the 17 or 18 million to build at that time didn't include purchasing the site acquisition.
okay. All right.
May I ask a question?
Please.
While we're here. First, I'd like to make a statement that I think we're getting caught up in this area of the report, and maybe we need to state it a little bit clearer that starting in 2014, there was a feasibility fire station committee put together, because he didn't become really the building committee until as the process went on. But is it my understanding that the information that was gleaned through the feasibility study process and the people you hired at that point in time, their numbers were different than what you have now, also because they did not include a lot of the components that you did this go round, mandates that had come about, didn't really understand all of the actual requirements and needs. So the space was smaller and the numbers were lower. Is that part of what happened with the feasibility study also?
Chief, could you comment, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The feasibility study is just that. It's looking and saying, can we fit our programmatic needs that we're estimating at this time onto this site? Some of the things that they didn't have when they did this was a full survey of the site. So they were going off the GIS, which was not accurate. They didn't include an elevator, which is a requirement for ADA. The bays were not made deep enough to fit all the apparatus. So there were quite a few things that came to light, and which isn't unusual when you go from a feasibility study to a final design. So all of those things came about, which is what resulted in the additional roughly 4,000. I think it's 3,400 or 4,000 square feet additional.
I think that's what confuses people. I don't think they understand that it was such a rough sketch, really, the first go round, and then you made the decision to buy the property and start the building committee and get your designers in. But
Yeah, it made it when we, and it also, we didn't quite do the deep dive at looking out 50 years either, which with HKT, they said, we want you to look out 40 to 50 years because you don't want to be putting additions on every 5 years because the cost is just going to be through the roof. So it makes more sense, build what you need now, and let's look out and see where you're going to be. So we really dove deep into that.
my only suggestion is you move forward to town meeting and you have to make your presentation is build that bridge, tighten it up a little
Yeah.
bit so people understand why one was one way and why it's this way now. Because I think some people are still on the other side of the bridge when they start to look at this and wonder how we got to the other side of this particular project. So if you can, you know it, you just explained it, just tighten it up a bit.
Yeah, I agree. We've already started work on that presentation. And also we didn't have the retaining wall in the feasibility because again, it wasn't designed to the proper depth and there were certain issues. So that added to it as well.
Thank you.
I'll add some lead in back in 2017 about the fire station feasibility committee. I'll add that to this as a bridge, as a lead into that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is the feasibility report available for financial planning committee view that we can look at for the old fire station to better understand what the assumptions were to be more educated?
Chief, that was online at one time.
Yeah, I mean, I have there's a presentation that was done at town meeting, which was the final feasibility study, which was town meeting of 2018, right? 2019, I'm sorry, April 2019, which would have all of that information, John, which I can email it to the committee. I think I still have a copy of it.
Yeah, and just so I'm clear, it's for the old fire station that includes 10 Church Street, just the cost elements that make up the $18 million to get a better understanding of what our assumptions were at that time.
Yeah, so we had numerous presentations throughout the course of the feasibility committee. I'm not sure if the final one had that. I do have one that has information on both Pierce Street and West Main Street, and I can send that to the chair, and he can send it out.
Chief, the November 2018 feasibility report had some of these numbers in it. That's what I looked at.
Yep, I have a draft from 11/29/18. So that's probably the one you're talking about.
Sure. Okay. We'll get that out to everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate everybody doing this, and I'm not trying to derail the conversation.
Oh, not at all.
But it's one of the first or second questions that people are asking about when the subject of the fire station comes up, and this is starting to land on people's radar, and they're starting to coalesce around it. One of the, it's a valid question, and so to the extent that we can tighten up the presentation, I don't know who's going to be doing the presentation at the town meeting, but to the extent that this can be sort of told, I think it helps connect the dots to how we got here, so that people aren't just thinking like, well, we just want to build a new fire station and that's what we're doing. So it like I said, it helps complete the story and makes it more cohesive. I wasn't aware until just now that the cost to renovate was essentially the same as building new, give or take.
Well, it was a yes, but Scott, when I looked at that, I'm saying it's not apples to apples.
Yeah, sure.
And didn't want to go down a rabbit hole like putting all of that in there.
No, I get it, but what you don't want is you don't want people to think that the cost to renovate was $3 million, right?
No.
Right. Okay.
So,
Right. It was a renovation addition, and we would have had to purchase a laundromat next to us and 10 Church Street, and those prices weren't in there as well.
Okay.
I'd just like to make a comment that I think that all the questions have been quite good, and I think it only makes the report better.
Yep.
And helps the people that have been looking at this time, day after day, understand that there are people still just with some questions. So,
Right.
never apologize for a question.
Yeah.
I think that's smart. And I think the other thing, like if you asked 10 residents what they thought we were voting on and the cost of it, you'd be surprised at the range of answers from from 5 million to 100 million. Like you just don't know, right? So I think we have a lot of transparency, education. Like I think it's important for us to make sure we're being very clear on what the information is.
Yeah,
Right.
the best message we have out there are all the videos that we've done and the frequently asked questions, the fire department page. And we're actually even updating those videos. We were updating them today with the new numbers. So that's all
Right.
great stuff.
So that, to the chief's point, that's hit YouTube. You can access that via the town homepage or the fire department's page on the website. YouTube, the fire department's Facebook account. What else, Chief? There's multimedia ways to get to that, as well as
Yeah.
the FAQs.
Yeah, there's links going out on Twitter and out on Instagram, and we send them out on every platform we have. The easiest way to get there is just go to the nb-firestationproject.org, and you can click on one link. It'll take you to all of them.
And I mentioned at the meeting last week, I hope that the Advocate picks this up and at least has some mention of it, so people who read the Advocate and don't look at social media a lot can realize, there's something out there.
Funny
We're
you
trying to
mention that.
raise the awareness.
We spoke with Laura last week, and there's supposed to be an article coming out this week.
Wonderful. Good. Okay. Shall we continue, folks?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So some lead in here about, how it's being designed. A little enhancement of the language we had here before. Not much of a change to that. It's going to have 30,800 gross square feet. And we have pictures of the building rendering as of July. Some of you have seen this before. This will presumably be in the chief's pitch at town meeting, as well as the schematics of the first and second levels. You've seen these before, I believe. These haven't changed. And then the site plan overview. Again, you've seen these before, and presumably they'll be talked to at the town meeting. Leading into costs, there's hard costs and soft costs. On this page 11, for the first time, we have the price of $41,364,992. And the project costs are estimated not to exceed that. And I have in here, subject to the final bid proposal from contractors. It's conceivable a contractor may come in less than that. But what's being asked for at town meeting is $41,300,000. And this is down $44,119,900. And why did this come down and where? I'll explain to you.
Can just before we get to that, I have a question. So the project costs are estimated not to exceed versus the project costs are subject not to exceed. I mean, I'm trying to get an understanding what the word estimated does in that sentence. Like, what does that mean? Is it binding? Is it require action? Like, is not estimated is not a word that I'm accustomed to seeing in language like this in a legal agreement or proposal.
Not a legal agreement. Number one, the town at town meeting will be asked to approve or disapprove this amount. And if it's approved, we cannot spend $1 more than this, not to exceed.
Is that clear here?
You don't like the word estimated, we can do something with that.
Yeah, that it's the project costs are estimated not to exceed. To me, that isn't clear language.
What would you like?
Estimated.
Will not, may not.
I think will not. I think will not is a stronger than estimated, subject to whatever review process.
Shall not.
Yeah, but
Shall
that
not.
may not happen. If the town is appropriating X amount of dollars, the contractor may bid a different amount that may be higher.
Ken, to your point, by law, we have to accept the lowest bid. We're going to go out to at least 3 bids. We're going to accept the lowest bid. And if this amount is approved at town meeting, we cannot,
The town can't spend more money than it's been
can't spend
approved.
more than this.
I understand that, but we cannot say that because we don't know what the bids are gonna come in at. I know we have to go with the lowest bid, but we don't know what those bids are gonna be. I've bid on plenty of projects in the past, and sometimes they exceed what was estimated.
If the bids come in above that number, we can't do anything with them. They have to go back out.
Right.
So that's all we can spend. It does so.
Can we talk about estimated there? I think I understand, Jonathan. I really don't like putting shell and legalese in a report like this that somebody sees it as more binding. I think the process from what I've been watching when I watch the committee meetings is that you have estimators and you've paid them money to give you estimates. That's all you have right now. And you are going out to bid with estimates and you're hoping to get bids less than the estimate. But we know that the estimate is this particular number. And if it goes beyond that number, we cannot accept that bid. So I think the word estimate fits the process that you've been through. It's a particular process that's happened. And so I don't have a problem with the word estimate, but if everybody else wants to change it, I just think you cannot exceed.
Let me expand on what Susan just said. HKT and Colliers independently went out to two estimators. They put together a project budget. These two entities came back with a very detailed look of the schematic design development, site acquisition, all of that stuff, and whittled it down to this number. This was the Mitch, can we say average of the two? But they whittled it down to this based on going back and forth.
What happens is the two cost estimators come together. I was there, HKT's there, the OPM's there, and they reconcile the numbers. So the one estimator is for the town, one works for us, the other estimator works for HKT. Then they discuss, okay, we both agree there's, I don't know, 100,000 square foot of concrete. We're seeing cost at $10 a square foot, and the other guy's seeing cost at $20 a square foot. So they reconcile it at $15 a square foot. And they do this for all the items to get that's where they come up with your final cost estimate. I only know because I sat through 3.5 hours of it.
Okay, so let me ask the question another way. Notwithstanding the changes to the language, what happens if the project does exceed this during the life of the project? I've heard people say the town cannot spend $1 more. So what happens if you get into it? Maybe the estimate is this number, but the price of concrete goes up over the course of the
That's
project.
covered under the contingencies. So the way that as part of the estimate, there's contingency cost of about $3 million. Those contingencies, it's 3.7 million, I think, are what the contingencies are.
It's a standard 5% contingency, correct?
Correct. So what that's for is for those spikes in cost, for that, oh, we didn't think of this came up, to cover those things. The best example I can give you, Colliers was the owner's project manager for the Lincoln Street School. At the end of that project, they came in $1 million under budget because they didn't expend all the contingencies. So that's what the contingencies are to cover those changes, Scott. So those unknown, oh my goodness, concrete's doubled in price or whatever it happens to be. That's what the contingencies are for.
Contingencies for the town to spend more, or contingencies for the contractor has to eat it if the total cost come in?
It's funds to cover the additional cost.
It's in the $41 million.
It's part of the $41 million, correct?
Right.
So, but the bottom line is if all the contracts come in and the costs exceed the $41 million, and which is part of the contingency, the town will have to cut things out of the project to maintain the $41 million. That's how it gets done. They'll have to figure out what they can live without and maintain the amount of money that's been approved by the town.
Right, but see, that, the bids come in well before construction ever starts, right?
Yep.
So the bids are all, the bids all come in, they're due sometime in February,
And they
February,
all
March.
have escalation
Okay,
factors too, based
As-
on.
escalation's all built into here as well. It's all
Yeah,
built
but
into
what
that
I'm
41
saying is that
million.
this is not, it's a dynamic thing we're dealing with, right? The only thing that's really fixed is the amount of money the town is appropriating. Everything else will be somewhat fluid, and hopefully there's enough contingency to handle that. There's enough other fees associated with it to cover it. But if the bottom line comes in, if you start exceeding that money, you're gonna have to cut. That's how you manage those projects.
So
May
the
I ask, are the soft costs in this number?
This is a hard and soft combined.
Okay, what I have found.
And
at
you'll
least with
see that in a
build-
minute, Susan.
Yeah, what I've found with building projects for schools, what has happened in the past when, especially with the high school, when it started to go over, some of the soft costs were cut back, but the building itself was built in the envelope and everything that was needed. But then you didn't get exactly all the furniture and everything else you wanted sometimes.
Correct. And the other option is the committee can always come back to at the next town meeting and ask for additional money or additional funds or whatever happens. But you know, that happens on occasion, but not all that often that I know of, for fire stations at least.
Right. And we're saying that the contingency cost, the 5% that Susan was mentioning, that's in this number already?
That's baked in here, Scott. That's correct.
It's $3 million plus dollars.
Right.
Is it 5%? 5% is $2 million. Is it 5% or is it more?
It's based on your contingency costs are based on your total project cost, which is 44,863,000, because that includes site act, the 3.499 that was originally voted on back in 2019. So your contingency costs are based on that number, not on your number minus your total cost of your project.
That's significantly less than $3 million.
Hang on. Clarification, Chief.
Yep.
There's a contingency on the construction costs and there's a contingency on the design
Yep.
part of it.
Yep, correct.
And they're different. I think it's 5% on the construction and 3% on design.
I don't have that right in front of
Unless I
me.
got it backwards.
I don't have it right in front of me, John, but
And
that sounds close.
it's in the budget that Collier's put together.
Yes.
I feel I did hear at your last meeting, the gentleman that was the estimator said that the contingency was 5% and is someplace over $3 million available.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Which would put the total project cost at a much bigger number. That would put the total project cost closer to the, 60 or 70 million than 40 million.
It's baked in.
I don't think
I'm doing math on the fly.
I don't believe, okay, just to clarify a couple of numbers here. 5%, it starts out when you're doing schematic design at 10% is what your contingencies are. When you get into design development, it goes to about 5%. When you get into construction documents, it drops to about 3%. So the closer you get to having an accurate design, the smaller your contingencies need to be, because you're figuring out what you're actually going to do.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So
it does, which would lead me to believe that if it's not 5% of numbers I'm seeing here, that there's more risk in the project meeting the design than if it was. I'm just trying to follow the logic stream.
Mitch
And
has
I
his
see
hand
Mitch
up.
has his-
One second.
Okay.
John, sorry, we'll take care of you and then we'll do Mitch next. Have we answered your question?
No,
Please repeat.
I'm not sure that. I mean, candidly, like based on everything that's being said, like unless people give me different percents of different numbers, my question won't be answered, because I'm hearing 3, and to get to the percents we spoke about, to me, and this is something I want to better understand, is like how much risk is there from what we know today and what the final design is going to be and what the costs are going to be. How much do we know? What percent do we know? Because I know we're moving really quickly in order to meet deadlines to get the fire station ready for vote for October 7th. And I'm just trying to understand that as we're having the conversation.
I think it's gotten very
Mitch,
confusing,
one
but I bet
second,
Mitch
Susan.
is jumping out of his
I
seat.
think so. I think Mitch is going to save us.
Yes.
Mitch, please unmute.
Sure. Thank you. I apologize. I'm on my treadmill, so I'm not going to turn my camera on and subject to that. The 41 million is the total project cost, if you will. You know, you might want to call that the total project budget. Might be a way to look at that. Within that, the largest component of that is the construction cost. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was around $31 million. The construction contingency is 5% of that construction cost. So, you know, roughly $1.5 million, if I'm remembering it right. There's also the owner's contingency, which is another about 5% in there. And those are to cover surprises that come up after you've signed the construction documents. So the questions of, well, what happens if concrete costs too much? That's on the contractor. So the contractor is going to bid an amount. We'll accept that bid. Then they're bound to do that work for that amount of cost. And if concrete goes up over the next few months until they need to buy the concrete, that's on them. The construction contingencies are for surprises in the contract documents relative to what needs to be built in reality. So, for example, the contractor's working in it, so they say, oh, you know, this says you need to put a door frame here, but there's also this pipe that is in this other drawing, goes across here, and you need to sort that out. Occasionally, architects make minor mistakes, so the construction contingency is to take care of those things. The owner's contingency is to take care of changes that come up along the way, usually minor, such as the architect might find a better hinge that, I don't know, performs better under stress or something like that. It costs a little bit more. So we add that in somewhere later after things go forward. And so that's where the designer's contingency, or the owner's contingency, comes into play. And then there are other soft costs above and beyond that all add up to the $41 million. So that's the amount of money we have to pay the architects, the amount of money we pay the project manager. There are some testing firms that do work along the way to make sure the concrete is, you know, sufficiently hard and the ground is dug up the right way and stuff like that. So it all adds up to 41 million.
I just found the contingencies listed, if anyone's interested. Construction contingencies are 1.6 and the owner's project contingencies are 2.0.
Sounds about right.
I
hope that answers some of your questions.
What is the owner? I'm not as clear on that. I think, is that some of the soft costs we're seeing here? Or how do we find owner in this? Is that the town of Northborough?
Yes.
And is that the contingency to buy stuff that's outside the scope of the general contractor that's in that 41?
It is for changes or additions that are unknown at the time of going out to bid. So it can be something like, I ran into this with a school project where I'll bring up hinges again, that a particular hinge that was specified in the bid specs, by the time they went to order it, was no longer available. But if we wanted the hinge to operate the same way and fit the same cutouts that we had already made at the doors, there was this other hinge we could get. It was a little bit more. So we used some of the owner's contingency to buy that more expensive hinge. It's those sorts of things. Sometimes there are things that come up that are unknown at the time. There might be, I can't think of anything right here, but for example, one project that I was on, we knew we needed to build a storage shed for athletic equipment for a school. And we intentionally didn't have it in the budget because we didn't know what size shed we would need. So we eventually got that to the contractor from the owner's contingency budget.
Okay, and then the soft costs that I see on furnishing, fixtures, AV equipment, data communications, security, that is in the 41.3 or outside the 41.3?
All this is in there, John.
Yeah, everything's in
Hard
there.
and soft, it's all in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that 41 is the entire project budget.
Thank you.
The whole enchilada, as we say in the Bronx.
Okay, I'll mute myself again, but feel free to call on me if anything else comes up.
Thank you, Mitch.
Sure.
I have a question.
Susan.
I've heard a lot about the contingency when I talk to people and listen to people. Should we be putting something in here, or is it just something that the fire station building committee should be very aware of, trying to explain it to people at town meeting?
What does the group think?
I'm more inclined to,
All projects have some kind of contingency. Whether it's a software project or a construction project like this, there's some contingency built in there.
I would say that if it is in this number, I would say that, because I think the feeling is that look, I don't even know is this going to get presented at meeting in written form? Like, are people going to see it? Because I think if there's an opportunity to address the question about cost overruns, why not do it? If that money is already in here and it provides an additional buffer for not going over, I think in the spirit of transparency, put it in. I don't see what harm it does.
Well, these dot points on this page address what's in hard and soft costs, number one. Talking to Andy Dowd, this will be sent to the select board, discussed and approved at the meeting next week. This document will be made available at town meeting for residents who show up at the town meeting. So they'll have this at that time.
did you say at one time it was going to be mailed home?
I was told this, and Andy has said no.
Okay.
Mitch, do you have any further color on that?
My understanding is that we're required under our bylaws to notify the residents of, of an upcoming special town meeting. All that's required to do there is send a postcard that says, by the way, here's the town meeting date and time, and perhaps the major topics on that meeting. In theory, we could, as a town, send anything back, but we would need a significantly larger budget if we were going to send a booklet versus a postcard.
My understanding, John, through the chair,
Yes.
my understanding is that the intent is to provide this information through that mailing by having a QR code to bring to the website, so that we're not doing a mailing that has 14 pages.
Yeah. And that's just financial planning, let alone what appropriations comes up with.
Right.
Will we, on that postcard, were we going to be transparent and say that this is something that would require a tax override, $42 million fire station?
We'll get to that on subsequent pages, John. It's in there.
I'm excited. Let's go.
I love a good straight man. Thank you.
I'm here for you.
So hard and soft costs at a high level are outlined here. The 41,000,003 is initially identified on this page. Here's the priority table as we've seen in other capital projects before. This is borrowed from what we had earlier in the year. The tax impact here, in talking with Jason, what you'll see on the next page is a table that we created as a result of your feedback last time, with breakpoints going from $400,000 in assessed value up to $1.2 million, and then what the estimated tax impact would be by year. We'll show you that in a minute. And for fiscal 25, the average single family home value is estimated to be $655,000, $691,000, just as a data point. This link on here, should people decide to click it, will take you to the homepage with property assessed data on it. So here is the table. And so I've got by year 25 to 30, and then skipping 5 years, 40, 45, 50, 55. This illustrates the tax impact based on the assessed value of homes, and it declines as the debt is amortized down over time. And it's based on these assumptions. So one of the key things here is the town will borrow $39,464,000, which is the 41,364 minus $1.9 million. The $1.9 million is the anticipated rebates associated with the geothermal system. Any questions on this? Well, we have Jason here.
Can I ask a very basic question about this?
Yes, sir.
So we're borrowing money. John, you used the word amortization. I understand what that means. I don't understand why the cost goes down every year. So I think about this and I think, okay, so I'm going to say my house is going to be assessed at 800,000. Year one, I'm going to be paying $538 extra. But in the year 2055, I'm only going to be paying 246. And I understand that the principal is being paid off, but aren't you then paying more interest at that time? In other words, aren't the town's payments level? Maybe they're not, because maybe the bonds mature throughout the 30 years. And if that's the case, then I guess I understand this.
Right. So
Jason, comment, please.
yeah, can I just say municipal debt and bonds get structured a little differently than a traditional mortgage where you'd have a level payment every year.
Okay.
And I think maybe the word amortization like threw people a little bit when that was said, but the way that debt works with a bond issue, we would make level principal payments every year over the course of the 30 years, and then interest would decline over time on the principal balance. So it's called declining debt. So over time, the debt table declines, even though the principal remains constant throughout the number of years that you issue the debt for.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for that. Probably very.
No problem. It's a good question. It's a reasonable question. People are used to seeing level payments, and they do exist from time to time. That there will be an amortization table requested from a borrower in the municipal world that would ask for a level payment. That we didn't request anything like that because that's kind of only people usually do that when they only have one issue at a time. We're frequently accessing the debt market, so we're going to be doing more projects in the future. So we just model our debt in a traditional way.
Got it. Okay.
I have a
Susan?
question. Are we locked in with warrant language and everything that it is going to be a 30-year bond, or can that be changed? I mean, I know that at some point in time, the select board needs to discuss it and decide if they want to do 20 or 30 years. So can you explain what might happen here?
Right. I mean, I think we work with what's called a financial advisor, and the financial advisor will market the debt to the debt market, and it's typically institutional investors that will bid on the debt. So we don't know what the interest rate is going to be until we conduct that auction, electronic auction, so to speak. If interest rates are falling lower than what we've projected here, and we've used a pretty conservative interest rate to develop these tables at 4.25%, indications are now in the market that the interest rates will drop and be lower. And in the past, the town has only encountered 20-year debt in the past, and this 30-year debt would be something kind of not unprecedented. I mean, it's allowed, and it's something that could be done to finance like a large project like this. But the 20 or 30-year question would be like what the market conditions are at the time when we go out to bid for the bonds. So we've been upfront about like this will be a decision that we'll take to the select board at the time, and we'll weigh both options. I mean, it's possible that these amounts could be achievable under a 20-year. Again, they wouldn't go out to 2055. They'd be going out to 2045 instead. But it's possible with a lower interest rate that they could go out to that far, because we've had lower interest rates in the past than 4.25%. So it's a moving goalpost and a changing environment.
So nothing will change between now and town meeting.
Not likely.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess that was unclear to me, so maybe unclear to others. So no decision has been made to use 30 versus 20. It is very much to be decided later.
Correct. I mean, the 30 years has been what's been modeled here because that's the longest term that we can issue.
Right. And I think I'm my, without putting it in a financial calculator, my understanding these numbers would be substantially different under 20. So like year one would look very different
Much
for
higher.
tax. So
Correct.
how do we communicate that? Because I would candidly, like if I was consuming the information, I would feel misrepresented if like I went to vote and here it feels very much like you're telling me it's going to be one cost and it's substantially more because we use 20, which may be the right thing to do, but I just feel that that's not very transparent.
No, I think the point was to be as transparent as possible by showing the kind of the worst case scenario with a conservatively high interest rate and a lengthier term than we possibly could issue. So
I guess
I think the point is not to I think if we could achieve these same amounts with a shorter term, I think that's what we would endeavor to do.
I think that would be great, but I think the worst case scenario for a taxpayer is that we tell a taxpayer that you have an $800,000 home and it's $538 in fiscal year 2026. We change the term, we change the interest rate, maybe it's slightly lower, maybe it's 4, maybe it's 3.75. However, the dollar value isn't 538, it's 691. And I'm making that up. But I think from a resident perspective, worst case is different than maybe putting interest rates, financial duration on it. So I think that's where I get a little bit concerned about, as being part of the financial planning committee, misleading what the cost is to taxpayers.
Right. The point is to deliver rates that are lower than what's shown in the table here. I think that the policy decision would be made not to decrease the term in order to increase the amounts that are shown in the table. That if that's
okay, then that's not
that's the point that I'm making.
Yeah, no, and I look at the point of this to be able to articulate to residents what the projected annual tax rate by year will be, and whether that means you've got some sensitivity based on duration and interest rate and cost, and we've got a cost number that we feel pretty good about. But what we're having a conversation right now is very different. If we change the duration and it's at a much higher cost for a taxpayer, they're asked to make much different decisions. I think that to me, that's not very clear at all, and I have a finance background.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point of providing so many numbers in this table is to show that when the policy decision comes up through the board of through the select board, that if these numbers can be achievable in a 20-year term, then that's likely what would transpire. Not
I would, if I saw a neighbor, I would explain it differently. So I'm thinking of it from a resident perspective, and I would explain. So from my perspective, I would say there's a table here that has a couple of assumptions. That 538, if it's lower, your year one might be higher. Good news is 20 years from now, Northborough pays off quicker, total cost is, but you as a resident, there's a cost to that. So it's just not clear to me. I would have to belabor the point, but to me, it's not clear.
Mitch, comment?
Thanks, John. Jonathan, every municipal debt project works this way, that the terms of the bond aren't known until you actually issue that bond, and that's always after town meeting approval. So there's no way to get away from that. The option to do 30 years is somewhat new in Massachusetts municipal government, but although the select board, in theory, is the policy board that would decide at some point how to do this, I would be shocked if we did not follow Jason's recommendations, and I'm sure he would follow the town's financial advisor's recommendations as far as the best way of financing this for the residents of the town.
Understood. It just has a different financial consequence than what's described in this. If we do the right financial decision for the town, it may mean that it's a higher cost and that this would be a low cost estimate in that instance if we were to go to 20 years rather than the 30. And I want to be clear on that. It does, and I can be clear in that conversation, but I want to be clear on that as a financial planning committee member.
Sure. So the way I'm interpreting Jason putting this as a 30-year bond on here, which was his decision based upon the recommendations of the financial advisors, is given the interest rates the way they have been right now, they would recommend a 30-year bond. So that's why this is on here at this amount. If by the time we bond this project, rates have dropped substantially, we can all cross our fingers and hope that to happen. We have no way to know that it will. Then they will consider recommending a 20-year bond instead of a 30-year bond. And we would certainly look back and say, hey, at town meeting, we said this was going to cost about X for the average taxpayer. We don't want that X to go up a heck of a lot. If we can keep that dollar amount about the same, but pay it off in 20 years, yeah, of course, we're going to do that.
Understood.
So, I mean, I think I would add the point too, that I think what would likely come to us from the financial advisor would be at this period of time, we used 4.25% for 30 years, and they would say at this point in time, the market is showing that 30-year bonds are returning 4% bids and 20-year bonds are returning 3.25% bids. And, we would run these tables and try to make sure we stayed within, and that would be part of the policy decision that the select board makes, that we would try to stay within these tables that are shown here.
Okay, I think it's misleading, and I know we're doing 20 to 30, and it's unprecedented in the fact that it's not precedented. That it's that part of the reason we're having this conversation. But I find it misleading, and that's all.
We're saying in here, this is based on the following assumptions. We'll borrow 39 million for 30 years. That's
Understood.
the assumption at 4.25%.
Understood. And what if we came back with a 5-year and decided it was a 1% and it was going to be an extra $4,000 for 5 years? I understand what the assumptions are, but it is misleading when someone's looking at what my tax bill means for a tax override, and it could substantially be different. And by substantially, I mean 15, 20%. So, and I think that is an outcome that could happen while making the right long-term financial decision for the town. The short-term consequence is taxpayers pay more than what's illustrated on this chart. That's the only point I want to make clear on. And I understand the points, but I'll be very clear on that.
And the select board ultimately has responsibility for fiscal prudence.
Understood. Just it's a report from the Financial Planning Committee that I find misleading, and that's my point.
May I ask, what does anybody suggest we could do to be clearer about this so that it doesn't appear to be misleading? I do think that Jonathan represents the point of view of many people. I hear the same kinds of things. They'll be asking these kinds of questions, and they're not going to have the time to get the kind of answers we've gotten tonight. They're still going to be scratching their heads and not feeling comfortable.
I don't think it's hard. I think it's, hey, there's to John Rappa's point, which I thought was well articulated. Hey, there's assumptions, and this is what the output of those assumptions are. Everyone's looking from their frame of reference of, okay, where do I fall on this table? You say, we're going to change one assumption. We're going to say 4.25% at 20 years and 4.25 at 30. Our intention is to go for 30 at 4.25. But just make it clear of the two, and people can understand what the impact would be if we decided to go for a shorter duration than we're talking about. Because 20 to 30 is come up in conversations on just sort of people being curious, like, aren't we usually 20? Why 30? And so I think this thing actually ties into some of the conversations people are having in town.
I think the average town person's not going to be that. What's the word I'm looking for?
Well, I don't know, John. We had 8 people.
Detailed. If we throw another table in here at 20 years, are people's eyes going to start to glaze over? We cut this down to these breakpoints with these assumptions. We throw another table in there. We can do that. Is it going to start a real goat rodeo in terms of, well, why don't you do this and why don't we do this? I mean, ultimately, it's the responsibility of the select board to say we're going to go this way.
Understood. But at the same time, everyone that is an interested party as a resident is going to look at one thing: projected annual tax impact.
Yep.
There's variables below that, but that's the number they're looking. They're looking at their assessed value of their home, and they're looking at the grid, and that's what they're looking at. So somehow I'd like to be more clear on it than it is here. I totally appreciate the conversation we're having. I don't know the sensitivity analysis to what that is based on the conversation. I can run the numbers and determine what it is, but I still don't know the magnitude just based on the conversation we're having right now. So I think it does have value to kind of clarify that and change one assumption, which is duration of loan. And costs only get lower if interest rates do in fact go down.
Yeah, so instead of maybe throwing a whole nother table out here, how about just another bullet point that, to John's point, someone can run the sensitivity analysis and say that at today's rates, and even if you use the same 4.5% assumption, here's what it is. The table is showing you 30-year numbers. That's our intention. But there's also a possibility if interest rates change that we could go with 20 and the numbers would be 11% higher than this. And I think if you just put it as a bullet point as opposed to a whole nother table, John, I get what you're saying about people's eyes glazing over, and that's probably true. But it'll give them an opportunity to think about it and say, okay, so I'm an $800,000 house, 538 is my 30-year number. I see down here that if we end up going with a 20-year number, it's going to be 10% higher. That's going to put me at 588.
You got to put a stick in the ground somewhere on that, Scott. 20 years at 4.25, 20 years at 4.
I think 4.25 is fine. Everything else is upside.
Yeah, I mean, at whatever the
fine. Then let me suggest this based on what Scott just said. We'll add another dot point saying something to the effect that, if the town goes out to a 20-year bond at 4.25%, that these numbers would be X amount higher.
Something like that. I don't think you need
Jason, would you give some thought to that? And we could discuss it tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't have a problem doing that. I mean, I know that, when I presented this information to the select board, we had some sensitivity analysis, and I know that it kind of got wiped out of this report here. I know it's a vast generality to say it, but it's about $100 more per year for at least at the average tax single family home value between 600 700. It's about $100 more for the 20 years, but again, there's 10 years less of the table there. So in terms of sensitivity, there's less interest over time. If you go to a shorter term, there's less interest, but it's more upfront.
Yeah. And look, I don't know what the likelihood is of going to 20 years. To me, it felt like we were doing 30. And maybe that's the 95% outcome, right? That we go 30, and maybe the 20 year is only a 10% probability that we do that. And if that's the case, I don't know. I wouldn't overcomplicate it, but I do think, to John Ray's point, that if there's a decent chance that it could be 20 and it changes the numbers, Jason, to your point, by it sounds like almost 20%, it's worth noting here. Maybe not in a full table, but maybe just in a bullet point.
I think it could be written in a way that it's not alarming either. It's really all going to happen when you go out to bond and you find out the interest rates have come to a place where you're very comfortable being able to move to 20 years. And that's the financial decision. The decision you're making right now is by advisors, and that's what advisors might say at some point. I just think we just need to tell the taxpayers that there's a potential that this could happen.
Yeah.
Well, we say here in the third dot point, second sentence, when the town goes to the market, it's likely interest rates may be lower.
Could be.
Again, in transparency, I think the long-term interest rate on the debt has been conservatively projected at 4.25%. Interest rates may be lower is probably strong enough. I think, again, as more subjective we are, the more I feel like people could feel misled.
Set the expectation, manage the expectation.
That's right.
Okay, so we'll add something to this.
I think it's good dialogue. I like the table. I think that I like the way that it did ours. I just want to be, from my perspective, transparency is the most important thing I think about in terms of how we navigate this, because it's hard, it's confusing. to Scott's point, I thought 30 was a done deal. I didn't even know 20 was even being contemplated. So even this conversation is helpful for me.
Well, this is the single largest dollar amount project we've encountered, larger than the Algonquin renovation years ago and the Lincoln Street.
Yeah. And listen, I would say to everyone, I don't know who put this together, John, whether it was you or Jason, but thank you, because to me, this was like a big, it was a sticking point, because I wanted people to be able to see in more detail than just the average tax bill is going to go up by $340.
Right.
Right. So this gets us there. And I think it really gives people an opportunity to zero in on where they are and what the impact is going to be that they're voting on. So,
yep. Okay. So page 14, 41,364,992. And the comments here are, is a request to design, construct, furnish, and equip a new fire station, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto. Such sums shall be raised by borrowing or otherwise. Appropriations contingent on approval of a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion ballot question in November.
May we speak of
Sure.
how it was we were able to get the number down to this number, what the decision was that was made by the building committee, what
Sure.
changed?
Okay. So, again, as part of the process, as was planned, both HKT and Colliers went out to independent estimators, and they came back to us the other day, and the prior estimate was in July. That's where we had the 44 million and change. They came back and tightened this number up, and this is where we got to the 41 million from what was 44,119,900. Through scrutiny, we realized that there was $2,001,399 in the 44 million that covered the OPM and the HKT work that had been done already. So that was double counted. That came off the top. And an additional 753,000 went back in because of escalations on construction costs, fixtures, furniture, equipment, fees, expenses, and contingencies. So that's the difference between what was 44,119,900 and where we are now at 41,364,900. So the good news is we brought the number down.
And
If you look at one last thing, Susan, if you look at where the early estimates of this project were, and it hit the rags back in February, it was like 43 to 49.9. 43.50 was the market at the time. So we got it down to 41.3.
Are the rebates in this for the geothermal or taken out?
The rebates are not reflected in the 41 million. If you look at what will go to the bond market is the bond market with, then the 1.9 million comes off of that. So we have to spend 41 million. We have to spend to put the geothermal system in before we get the rebates.
Okay.
So that the rebates are not in that number. No.
Okay.
Any other comments on this table? Again, we changed the priority to both 1, 2, and 4 based on your feedback last time. Are we ready to vote on this, committee?
Do we still have Ken?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, great.
Good. Let's do a roll call vote.
Are we gonna get Rob's vote ever captured? He's still on the financial planning committee or no?
He's traveling. He's
Okay.
traveling.
Wasn't
So
sure
he's-
based on the email.
I think he's flying back into Logan as we speak from what Scott said. So he's
Okay.
not available.
So I
We-
just, I just want to be clear, if we're voting on something that isn't finished yet, right? So we're gonna have to vote it with the understanding that the modifications or amendments we made the way we want.
That's what we did at the last meeting.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
I move that we support the fire station building project at a cost of $41,364,992.
Point of clarification, we're voting on the project or we're voting on the report?
We're voting on the report, and specifically since we've changed the project cost numbers lower. That's the major salient change to it.
So I amend it to report for the fire station project.
Amended report. Thank you. Yes.
Are they different? Was there a number not to exceed last time, or no, they're required back to make?
We basically, the main thing is John, we swapped out the number that was higher, was 44,000,000 too.
Okay.
That's the main salient point. And that the table we just spent time discussing, that was updated as a result of the 41 million. Those are
Jonathan,
the salient changes.
they brought it down 2 million.
That's my understanding. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm trying to contextualize the bring down of 2 million.
Yeah, that's the
John,
salient
I thought we might
parts.
get your vote.
We haven't voted yet.
I know,
We're about
but I'm just
to
saying.
about to get there.
Oh,
I know.
I thought I missed that. No.
No. Okay, so
Did anybody
can't keep-
second that?
So again, I want to go back. We're voting on approving the concept of the project based on the dollar amount, and we're also approving the report being amended as discussed today. Is that what we're voting on?
yes.
Yes. So amended. Anybody want a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call. Ken Picard,
Aye.
John Ray,
No.
Susan Satori,
Aye.
Scott Stockland,
Aye.
and I vote aye, John Rappa. So majority recommendation to approve this will be amended.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Okay, I'll work with Jason to get an appropriate language, a dot point to add to that table, and we'll get this out hopefully tomorrow.
And it will be delivered to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for the 9th.
A copy of this
select
will be
board.
sent to Mitch and Tim McInerney, and Jason will drop a copy to Scott Rogers relative to appropriations, so we all know what's going on.
They have a meeting on Thursday. Any chance they'll be
That
able
is,
to, they'll get it?
Yeah.
I gave him the prior version of this in terms of just, the spirit of what we have in here. So he has an idea of where we're going with it.
Okay.
Before we conclude, hang on one second here. To adjourn. We will be at town meeting October 7th at Algonquin. I think the meeting is it 7 p.m., Jason, or
It is at
Jason,
7
you still
p.m.
there? 7
It is
p.m.
at
Thank
7
you, Chief.
p.m.
Thank you. If you recall from back in April, we have a seating, a dais up in the front. Presumably it's going to be us and appropriations and select board in the front. There is one other item on the ballot that night, which is the approval of the Marlboro water contract.
Yeah, there will be a second article, at least one more article. I think that the article we were talking about it today, it's probably going to be 2 articles, but it's to provide more money for the sewer enterprise
Sewer fund.
to pay to
Right.
the city of Marlboro,
Right.
following us entering into an IMA with them over the settlement.
Right. So like we did in April, more than likely Angie will get a classroom for us to gather before the meeting. Look for emails coming out from her or myself on that as we get closer to October the 7th. And any questions we have in between, feel free to reach out to the committee.
Through the chair,
Please.
I want to thank John for pushing us to be better in our reports. Last
Yep.
meeting and this meeting. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, John. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is ended at 8:22 p.m. Thank you all.